Good morning. I'm Robert Kelly. I'm one of the pastors here at the church. For those I haven't yet gotten a chance to meet, welcome. I'm so glad that you have taken some time out of your busy lives to spend some time here with our spiritual family, our little community of faith here as we pursue God. And we're in the midst of a series called Characters Welcome, and we're really excited about it. It's a study through some of the more interesting and challenging teachings and readings of the Old Testament. And it's been very interesting as we've met some of these Old Testament characters. There's so many colorful people in the stories that we have been reading about of late. So a bus load, I decided to give the lawyers a break this morning. So a bus load of politicians was driving down the road. And they ran off the road, unexplained, and they had an accident. They crashed into a tree in a farmer's field. So the farmer, he goes out there to kind of investigate and check out the situation. And when he gets out to the site, he just sees this, this big old wreckage, and he proceeds to start digging a giant hole. So he digs this giant hole, and he buries all of them. So a few days later, a cop comes over, and he sees the wreck, and they know they've been looking for the bus, and he says, "What happened?" He says, "Oh, they crashed." And the cop says, where are the politicians?" He says, I buried them. He says, they all died? And the farmer says, "Well, some of them said that they were still alive, but you know how all those politicians lie." And isn't that the case? That it isn't just politicians, but even from our earliest memories, we realize that we have lied, that we've cheated, that we've betrayed, that we've disappointed, that we've neglected. They all lie. And when we look through the stories that we've been reading, again and again and again, the nation of Israel finds themselves disobeying God. We can get so frustrated at them. We can say, "Oh, how can they do this over and over and over again?" But then it's just a quick jump to our own lives when we realize, wait, we've disobeyed. Back to our earliest memories, we were doing things that we knew were wrong. Maybe your strongest memory from childhood is a memory of something you did wrong. It's just one of these things. It's so true. It's so much a part of the human condition. This is why, for many of us, we grew up with a fairly robust sense of guilt. There's a little bit of debate. If you kind of go out there and you kind of, you're searching for guilt and, who experiences guilt more. In our area, of course, you've got the stereotypic, Jewish mother guilt. That's supposed to be a serious guilt. I didn't have a Jewish mother, so of course I don't know anything about that. But my understanding is it's pretty serious stuff. Of late, I've been hearing a lot more about this thing called Pentecostal holiness guilt. If any of you came from a Pentecostal background, then you're familiar with this. It means anytime you smile, you've sinned. It's pretty much the way it breaks down. Like, something's wrong. If anything good in life has happened to you, it's a bad thing in some way. I'm much more familiar, and many of you are much more familiar with good old Irish guilt. Irish Catholic guilt, to be precise. That's where most of us grew up with. That's how most of us grew up. We understood what it means to really beat yourself up for doing things wrong. Now, we all experience this because at one point in our lives, we either know today or we knew at some point in our lives the importance of obedience to God. We knew that we were supposed to obey. We know that we're supposed to obey, and yet we don't. And when we fail, we get guilty. We experience guilt. Now, of course, normally, we have all sorts of ways you could think through your life, all sorts of ways to deal with our guilt. We want to wrestle with it. We want to figure it out. And so, maybe we've got this guilt, and so what we'll do is, we'll sort of ignore it. I got this guilt, but it's not really. Maybe we'll rationalize it away. That's not that big a deal. Maybe I have this guilt, but maybe I shouldn't have this guilt. Maybe guilt is really nothing more than a relic of a bygone era. It's just a way to think about the way things used to be, and it's just religious structures pressed in on us. We just gotta forget about it, and it's just, we gotta live without it. And it's a very compelling argument for many people. For some of us, of course, we just say, all right, I'm gonna deal with my guilt in a much more subtle way. If I can't ignore it completely, I'll just sort of distract myself from it. I'll go keep myself busy, or I'll medicate myself in one way or another so that I don't have to worry about this thing, this guilt pressing in on me. Others, we try to pay it back. We try to make it right somehow. All right, so I've screwed up. Now I'm going to just do something to fix it. How many of you are flower givers? Like you go out, how many guys here like to go out and buy a nice bouquet of flowers for the lady that you love? A couple guys, I hope? Oh, you guys it's messed up. All right, let's start there. Let's scrap the lesson for today. Gentlemen, no. All right, so I like to give, I occasionally, I like to give a night. Have any of you ever experienced this where you go in to give, it's not a holiday, it's not a special day or anything. You're stopping off, you're going to buy a bouquet of flowers, you're going to bring them home, and someone in the store says to you, oh, so what'd you do now? Has that ever happened to you? If you go and try it out this week, away from a holiday, you go in there, you buy, the bigger the bouquet, the more impressive it is, the more likely someone there will say, so what'd you do? What'd you do? That you've got to pay this back, because that's what we try to do. We've done something, we have guilt in our lives, so what we do is we try to bring God some flowers. And we're like, oh, can I make up? Can we make up? Look, I'm trying to do something good so that you'll like me again. Now, normally, when we talk about guilt, I'm the guy that will tell you, you can't be crippled by your guilt. You can't allow your guilt to break you down. Guilt is this thing that is just oppressive, and it's dangerous, and it robs your joy, and so this is what I normally would be telling you guys. And you know what? For some of you, you've got such a guilt burden in your lives that's actually the message you need to hear. That's not the message of this morning, though. And so this message is asking a question about the possibility that maybe sometimes we don't experience our guilt deeply enough. Maybe there are times where we have to go deeper into our guilt in order to get to the place where God wants us to be. Sometimes it's the only way. Sometimes going deeper is the only way to redeem a given situation. How many of you have known crazy cat people? You've known the crazy cat people. They don't have one cat or even two cats or even three cats. You know what I'm saying? Maybe some of you are crazy cat people. So you should get help. You ever notice there's no crazy dog people? Just think about that. There's crazy cat people. There's a couple crazy dog people. There's no real. Have you known crazy cat people? So this one guy is Craig Smith. He became crazy cat guy. He got a cat. He inherited a cat. Didn't know the cat was pregnant. So he ended up with 5 cats. So after 5 cats already, that's like 5 cats too many. And so you've already got too many cats. Then he took in another cat, a stray, and then another cat. Before he knew it, I don't know what number it is, but it's up like 6 or 8 is certainly way, way, way past crazy cat status. 6 or 8 cats later, he's crazy cat guy. You guys, you know what this is like. All the cats all over the house. So what does he do? Does he deal with his crazy cat? No. This guy, he buys a 30-acre ranch, Caboodle Ranch, and he gets more cats and more cats. In fact, he dedicates a good portion of his life now to this effort of rescuing cats. He saves them. He gets them fixed and neutered. He cares for them. He gets vets out to make sure that everything's all right. And he gives unwanted cats a way to live out the end of their days. Now, is he crazy cat guy anymore? Or is he now the guy that's doing some good in our society? Is he some guy that now, see, he actually went so far into this thing that at some point he stopped being crazy cat guy to me. At some point I actually said, good for you. You had an idea, a mission, a vision. You went after it, and you're doing some good. I wish it had been for something better than cats, but he stopped being crazy cat guy. And there are times in life where you actually need to go deeper in order to get through. That's what I'm suggesting is a possibility here this morning for us as we think about this concept of our disobedience, the need for obedience, and our guilt burden with God. Now, I think as we sort of start to get into this, we have to remember a little bit about where we've been. We've seen time and again in the scriptures that obedience to God is essential for the abundant life. We've seen it from the very beginning of the story. It is essential to live the abundant kind of life. But when we talk about obedience to God, we can sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed because We feel like, oh, God's, he's kind of this big angry thing in the sky somewhere, and when we disobey, he's going to punish us. When we obey him, he's going to reward us, and we have this almost love-hate relationship thing going on. It's because fundamentally we misunderstand what obedience to God is all about. We think it's maybe some sort of an ego trip for God, or maybe it's a power trip for him. And if that's the case, then it's like, oh, he's going to set up these rules, and if we obey the rules, then things are good, and if we disobey the rules, then, things are going to go bad for us. That's who he's going to be. But we forget, as we've seen over the last few months, as we've kind of looked at God's laws and what it means to obey, disobedience means that children are taken advantage of. Disobedience means that wives are manipulated, that husbands fail in their responsibilities to society and to their families. It means bosses are robbed. It means employees are mistreated. It means foreigners are neglected or abused. It means young girls are taken advantage of by powerful people. It means that young men live their lives with an emptiness of purpose, going after things that don't really matter. You see, in the scriptures, to disobey God means to violate shalom, to break down the peace, the order that was meant to exist here in this world. And it's the order that we thrive under. You see, when we disobey God's commands and all of these kinds of things happen, is that the world we want to live in? Is it really hard to agree with the scriptures that if we were to all do it God's way, that this would be a great world if we all obeyed these laws? You see, because at the heart of God, his demand for our obedience is an act of love on his part. It's an act of great compassion to create an environment and a place where there's hope and love and peace and joy and mutual respect. We have to remember that as we talk about the importance of obedience to God. Otherwise, we'll have this kind of an idea that when God does this, he's on some sort of a cosmic power trip, which isn't the case at all. Now, the Israelites were very far from obeying God. They were in a desperate situation. They had this very powerful enemy that they were fighting called the Philistines. It was going to be 200 years of grief that they were going to be giving. And let's open up to 1 Samuel chapter 2, starting in verse 22. And we're going to be introduced here to a contrast that is going to be developed throughout the book of 1 Samuel, as well as the later readings over the next couple of weeks. Starting in verse 22. Now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing in all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, it is not a good report that I hear spreading among the Lord's people. If a man sins against another man, God may mediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who will intercede for him?" His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. As the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with men. We have this contrast going on between Samuel, the one who's growing up in obedience to God, and Eli and his sons. They represent the old order of things, the priests. Eli and his sons were the priests of the people, and they were wicked folks. Eli wasn't as wicked as his sons, but he was certainly negligent in all of these ways, weak, you might say, and his sons were wicked, and they represented the people. They represented them in more ways than one. The people actually reflected them, and they represented their people. You might say they got exactly the leaders that they wanted in Eli and his sons. But the scriptures are contrasting with this Samuel figure, this boy that had been dedicated, consecrated from birth. And he's coming onto the scene, and he's growing in stature and in favor with God and with men. And back and forth we go. Who are the people going to cry out to for help? Are they going to cry out to Eli and his sons, or will they cry out to the Samuel that is beginning to enter into this scene? Now, when you hear about something like this warning that Eli gives to his sons, you've got to just keep this in the back of your mind here, because at the heart of this is why sometimes going deeper into guilt is so important for us. See, Eli is telling them, when you have a problem with each other, God may mediate for you. But when your problem is with God, who will stand in your behalf? Who will intercede for you when you've come against God? Don't do such a thing, Eli warns his sons. Now, how are the people going to deal with their guilt? How are they going to fix all of these problems? How are they going to overcome their challenges and fight the Philistines and all of this? Well, they are going to go back to the old, tired forms of religion that they are trusting in to bring God's blessing on their lives. Take a look at, flip over to 1 Samuel chapter 4. 1 Samuel 4. Starting in verse 1. And Samuel's word came to all Israel. Now, the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at Ebenezer. Now, Ebenezer means God helps. So they're sitting here at a place looking for God's help. They're looking for God's help at Ebenezer. And the Philistines at Aphek. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. When the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." This is the ark that Moses was commissioned to build. It held the Ten Commandments, the ark from Raiders of the Lost Ark, the gold box with that's the ark. And that ark is what Moses built, that Joshua took into the promised land, that they carried around Jericho, that they walked into the Jordan with. This is the presence of God. And this is what brought them victory in their military battles in the past, or, of course, how they perceived it. It's what brought them victory. So they go back and they go, "We just lost a battle. Let's go get this. Let's go fix this battle. Let's go back, get the ark, and bring that into battle with us." Verse 4. So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the ark of the covenant of the Lord Almighty, who was enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the ark of the covenant of God. When the ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp?" When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "We're in trouble. Nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us! Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? These are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the desert. Be strong, Philistines. Be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. This is a dark day for Israel. This is actually the darkest day since slavery in Egypt. They went out and they trusted in all of the old forms of religion to save them. They went out and they said, "Oh, if we have the ark with us, we'll have to win. In some way, it's like magic. Our problem is with the Philistines, and if God is with us, he'll help us beat the Philistines." But remember Eli's warning to his sons? Is your problem really with the Philistines, or is your problem with God? Who will mediate for you if your problem is with God? See, this situation it's a dark day. They trusted in the priests. These disobedient priests, the priests were more corrupt than the people, it seems. How could you trust in them to mediate for you? They trusted in the objects of faith, you might say. They brought out the ark. They trusted in the object, in the rituals. They trusted in their traditions, in their past. But with no change of heart, no affecting of the will, of the mind, no change in their disposition before God. See, they were nibbling at their guilt, but they weren't fully going deep into it. They thought, "Oh, there's some issues here. We forgot to bring the ark. Oh, those are the real problems." But they're failing to deal with the real heart issues that were causing their defeat. When you see these kinds of things, it's so quick for us to make the jump to what we do. You know, we want to confess our sin. We go through a little tradition. We want to make sure we hit the high holy days. You know, whatever it is that we think our traditions will do for us when we approach God, we rely upon them. God is saying, why do you trust in these old, tired forms of religion? I am calling you out to obey me, to follow me, to trust in me with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and you're running and getting the ark? That's the best you can do? Because now we're dealing with the outward look of things and how weak that really is. You know, it's kind of, we were talking about it this week, and we came up with this idea of these rusty objects that, you know, sort of are in all of our lives. This is a flywheel, by the way. You know, it's all pitted and it's rusty. And you guys all have something rusty in your world, right? You've got like a rusty garden tool or a handrail or something that needs a whole lot of attention. And the rust is eating it away. It's destroying it. It used to be pretty good. Now it's getting all messed up. And if you continue to trust in these rusty sorts of things, you will be sorely disappointed. So what do? We rip out a flywheel like this. We go, oh, look, the rust. Well, let me dust it off a little bit, and, you know, we'll paint it and whitewash it. And is that going to do you any good? You got to strip this down to the bare metal. You can imagine a handrail that's freshly painted over a core of rusty metal. How good and trustworthy is that? You're going to get out there and work the garden with a rusty tool. Hit a little paint. I had a wheelbarrow like this. Completely rusted out. Brand new paint job. Works great, let me tell you. It's terrible. This is what happens when we nibble around on our guilt, where we flirt with it, where we don't go deep with it. See, we look at it and we go, let's clean it up a little bit. Let's use a little Windex. You know, we're going to clean that thing up and make sure everything is okay. But it isn't going to be okay. Because there's something deeper, more significantly wrong. And if we're just whitewashing it, if we're just trying to make it look pretty, what good will that do? It's actually worse. It'll give you a sense of confidence and trust. And that's what we even saw here. The Philistines, they got all upset. They got all nervous. And they got encouraged to fight harder. The ark actually became a means to the increased destruction of the nation of Israel, not of deliverance for them. Now, in our story, the ark takes care of itself. It's kind of a neat story. If you didn't read it, over the last week, it's a fun story to kind of get into. But the Israelites realize now that there is not a simple solution, and that things are worse than they may have realized. In fact, take a look back at in our text here in chapter 4. Look at verse 12. That same day, a Benjamite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh, his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he arrived, there was Eli sitting on his chair by the side of the road, watching, because his heart feared for the ark of God. When the man entered the town and told him what had happened, the whole town sent up a cry. After this, Eli, he hears that the ark has been captured. He falls off his chair and he breaks his neck. He's dead. His 2 sons are dead, and he's dead. The ark is gone. The priests are killed. See, they thought this was just a little battle with the Philistines. God himself is standing against them. Things are much worse than they realized. We get a hint of this in verse 19. His daughter-in-law, wife of Phinehas is one of the guys that just got killed, was pregnant, and near the time of delivery, when she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. As she was dying, the women attending her said, "Don't despair, you've given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay any attention. She named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel," because of the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband. Ichabod, the glory is gone. What hope is left? See, they had not gone deep enough. There is no hope. The glory is gone. The ark has been captured. We fail to experience the fullness of our rebellion against God. We think, we've made a few mistakes. We screwed this up. We screwed that up. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to paint this. I'm going to, dust this. I'm going to bring some flowers, make God happy again. But the glory is gone. Ichabod, it's the best we can do. That's it. What hope is left? It's only at this point that Israel begins to see the fullness, the depth. They have a problem with their God. It isn't a conflict with the Philistines that should be of most concern for them. It's their disobedience to their God. Who will mediate between them and their God when you've made an enemy of your Creator? Now, once you can get to this place, you can kind of go back to Eli's warning in that to his sons. And we experience this depth of guilt and this depth of hopelessness. Nowhere will you ever find in the scriptures where you need to remain there. You may need to visit there. You may need to go there to begin to get a grasp on the fullness of what is really going on in the human heart and in our condition before God. But these, to get past our sort of meager efforts at walking with our God, we come to the story in 1 Samuel 7, where we get a glimpse of a change that has taken place in the hearts of the Israelites. Look in verse 2. It was a long time, 20 years in all, that the ark remained at Kiriath. This 1 Samuel 7, chapter 2. That the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim. And all the people of Israel mourned and sought after the Lord. You see this change going on? Now the people are mourning. Now they're seeking after God. You see, it's not like they're going to run up and get the ark and try to do some magic here. Now their hearts are starting to be torn. They're entering more fully and deeply into their guilt before God. And Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, notice it's not Eli and his sons anymore. Now we have Samuel back on the scene. He's been quiet for a few chapters. Now we have Samuel back on the scene. He says, if you are returning, and Samuel said to the whole house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your hearts, then rid yourselves of the foreign gods and the Ashtoreths and commit yourselves to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. So the Israelites put away their Baals, these are their false gods, their Ashtoreths, and served the Lord only. See, there's a change going on in their hearts. They've embraced it. They've recognized the extent of their guilt, and now they're turning around. They're saying, I want to be wholeheartedly committed to the Lord our God. I want to leave all of these false idols. I want to stop disobeying him, and I want to obey him with everything I've got. Verse 5, then Samuel said, assemble all Israel at Mizpah, and I will intercede with the Lord for you. When they were assembled at Mizpah, they drew water and poured it out before the Lord. And on that day they fasted, and there they confessed, we have sinned against the Lord. And Samuel was leader of Israel at Mizpah. You kind of get these pictures, right? He was the leader now. They were listening to him. They were asking for him to intercede on their behalf. They were looking for their help, their Ebenezer. Last time they trusted in Phinehas and Ferb and Hophni, and they trusted in the priests, and they trusted in only those things that they, like the ark. But they weren't repentant. Now they're trusting in Samuel. He is their leader. They're asking him to intercede. Verse 7, the Philistines heard that Israel had assembled at Mizpah. The rulers of the Philistines came up to attack them. Here's a second war with the Philistines. Whole repeat of what we had just seen. It seems as if nothing has changed, but of course we recognize that everything has changed. When the Israelites heard of it, they were afraid because of the Philistines, and they said to Samuel, do not stop crying out to the Lord our God for us, that he may rescue us from the hand of the Philistines. Then Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered it up as a whole burnt offering to the Lord. He cried out to the Lord on Israel's behalf, and the Lord answered him. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel in battle. But that day the Lord thundered with loud thunder against the Philistines and threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to the point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far has the Lord helped us. So the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again. See, what he's telling them is you need to turn. He said, you got to turn away from these things. You need to confess that you are in fact a sinner. You need to, and they did. We've sinned against God. You need to get to this place where you actually turn away from the things that are pulling you away from God. You can't just talk the talk. You can't just, try to feel a little bit bad about these things. It has to be a full, wholehearted repudiation of the past. You have to move away from them with an entirety and a ferocity. There was a man, he went in to go see his priest, and he said, "Father, bless me, I've sinned." And he said, "My son, what's wrong?" He says, "I've spent the last week sleeping with 7 beautiful women." The priest says, "Wow." He's like, "Well, first thing you need to do is take 7 lemons. You need to squeeze those lemons into a glass. And then you need to drink the lemon juice." The man said, "Okay, will that cleanse me from my sin?" He says, "No, but it'll wipe that stupid smile off your face." Because what it means to repent on the surface and to wipe the stupid smile off your face. They're very different things. You see, you can go in and say, "Oh, I wish these things hadn't done. I wish I hadn't done these things. I wish I had." You confess it. You say these words, but what do the words really mean for us? And he's saying, you've got to take... Later on in the chapter, you'll see Saul. He does this. He says, "I've sinned," but he never changes his ways. Saul loses the kingdom because he does this exact thing. He confesses, he says the words, he trusts in the forms of religion, but he doesn't actually see a change of heart that says, "I know I've sinned, and I need to cry out to God and to his deliverer." And now here's where you can make the key, a key blunder. Because at this point you can say, "Okay, what I need to do is I need to try harder. What I need to do is I need to work up the strength to really repent and to really obey. And then when I do that, now, you know what you're going to end up with? An even greater guilt load. You're going to end up feeling even more oppressed. You're going to feel even more separated from your God. Because you'll have missed the key storyline in this. See, in this story, Samuel is the figure of Christ. He's the picture of Jesus. He's the promise, you could even say, of God's deliverer. You can see the difference when you're going through this story. Not only do they listen to Samuel, but you can find out that Samuel is their leader, as I'd said earlier. They cry out to him. Did you notice that his simple offering is more successful than having the ark itself with them? See, they cried out to their deliverer, the one that God had appointed for their day. They trusted in him. And the similarities between him and Jesus are sort of interesting. They both grew in stature with knowledge, in stature with man and with God. You noticed that in the text earlier? That was something they said about Jesus. They both had miraculous births. There was something crazy going on that God finally opened up a womb, or he gave the virgin birth in Jesus' case. And you see, there's some similarity between Jesus and Samuel that you're not meant to miss. From our vantage point, we could see that Samuel is the Christ figure. And when you turn to God, you know that you have disobeyed. You have to go back to the promise of the cross. You have to go back to that place to say, "You know what? I'm not going to try to do this on my own anymore. I'm going to give myself wholly and fully and completely to Christ." And when you do that with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, now you see, you won't do this if you do not experience the fullness of your guilt before God. But when you do, and when you realize that nothing you can do can bring you back to him, that nothing you can muster up, no strength of yours is enough. Listen, we're more like Eli and his sons than Samuel. We're more like the Israelites. We often struggle in these areas of obedience. Christ tells us when you trust in him, he will give us the power of the Spirit to obey. He'll turn our hearts so that we might love him more fully and completely. He'll do a work changing us from the inside out so that we might become a type of redemptive force in this world. See, then we let go of our disobedience. We don't have to experience our guilt in that same way. We get to experience guilt and the forgiveness of our guilt. We get to trust in our deliverer like the Israelites trusted in Samuel. And when we do that, each individual, we bring a little bit more of the forgiveness of Christ into our experience and into the lives of the people around us. And when we do that as a community of faith, we look to bring God's laws, his justice, into every relationship that we impact with our lives. When people sin against us, when people have hurt us in some way, guess what we get to do? We get to offer up the hope, the restoration of all things that we have experienced. We get to bring the forgiveness of our disobedience and work toward an ever greater obedience, not out of some sense of obligation or failure, but of hopefulness and a fullness and a completion that we can have as we throw our heart, mind, soul, and strength into our walk with our God. Would you guys pray with me? Lord, as we look through this story, it is challenging to us in so many ways. In many ways, the surface of it, it looks so obvious. It looks so easy. We experience some guilt. We turn to religion. And yet, Lord, you weren't in it. You weren't in it. And so readily, this is what we try to do. We turn toward surface kinds of things, not realizing just how deep our transgression is, just how hopeless our situation is, how guilty we really are. And because of that, Lord, we're not willing to even consider more drastic steps. We're not even willing to consider what it would mean to abandon all of our other false hopes, our false leaders, our false masters, those things that we serve day in and day out. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to experience rightly the effect of our disobedience to you. Breaks your heart, Lord, when we hurt ourselves and the people around us. May it break our hearts too. May we begin, Lord, to experience the fullness of this, the depth of it. May we go deeper into it so that we might cling to you with a kind of abandon that we've never had before. We know that you, time and again, provide a deliverer for us. And when you provide, you never fail. May we trust in your provision. We ask all of these things in Christ's name. Amen.